How about that? Rumor has it. There we go. You heard me, right? I said no. But let's ask a variation of the question. How should the church get pluralism? Pluralism is the world that we live in. There's no choice. We're surrounded by a variety of peoples, cultures, languages, diversity of races, etc. There is no way to avoid the pluralism that's in the world, and some of that was designed by God. So we have to face up to the reality of pluralism. What does this require of us? It requires one consummate skill: listening. Most of us are not good listeners. We prefer to talk. We have an agenda. We know what we want to persuade someone else to believe. But before I can engage meaningfully with the content, particularly content that is contentious, where people are coming at it from different angles, I need to know and connect the person I'm having the conversation with. And that means I've got to be a good listener, which means that I need to be able to get a spiritual GPS reading on someone, even if they are not spiritual. Okay? Now, if that causes you to lose sleep tonight, I've done you a favor. All right? Because everyone has some sense or is struggling with some sense of, and now we're back to the first question, who they are and why they're here. And to know how someone is attempting to put that together, what they value, what they don't value, whether they've had an experience in church or whether they've had no experience in church whatsoever, whether they know what Genesis is or they think Genesis is the beginning of something that just has nothing to do with religion, etc. All that's worth knowing. So getting a spiritual GPS reading on where someone is important. And when you're getting a spiritual GPS reading on someone, you are simply trying to understand how they are putting their story together. No right or wrong, no doctrinal meter that you need to play with, although all of us have some form of doctrinal meter, whether we're Christian or not. We have those things that we believe and those things that we reject. But all your simple goal is to try and say, how does this person put the world together, and what do they see, and what values do they have? Which means that the only way for us to function in a pluralistic world is to get to know one another a little better. What I will call proximity. Have proximity to people of different backgrounds, etc., to understand what drives them and why. So I'm going to illustrate this with, I host a podcast called The Table. And we did a series on Eastern religions. And when we went into it, I knew schmatz about Eastern religions. Okay, schmatz is a term that means I knew about this much. Okay? So I didn't know much about Eastern religions. So I said, well, let's do a series on Eastern religions. I've never lived in the East. I know there are a variety of religions. I don't know very much about them. So we did. But we didn't do it the way Christians would normally do it. Usually when you study religion, you say, this is what the Bible says. And this is what this religion says, and we put them together and we find out how they align. Now, that is an important thing to do. I'm not saying don't do that. But here's how we did it. We asked 3 questions. What does this religion believe? In fact, is it even a religion, or might it just be a philosophy? Okay, in the East, that's an important question to ask. Second thing is, what is the Velcro factor that makes someone adhere to this religion? You know what Velcro is. You know, you have it, it's sticky. Okay? So what's the Velcro factor? And I have something more in mind than simply I was born in this part of the world and so I inherited this religion. No, the question you're asking is, what is it that makes this religion attractive to someone that would cause them to align their life story to what it is that this religion is espousing? And then the third question we asked was this: how does the gospel speak to that Velcro factor? What is it about the gospel? Because I deeply believe, as Paul has already suggested, and as the plea for educating our kids suggests, that the Christian story is a holistic story that makes sense out of life. So the gospel is going to speak into that space relationally, not just content-wise, in terms of what's going on. How does the gospel speak into that space? And then when I talk about being prepared to have a conversation about this religion, about which I might know very little or hopefully more after the contest series than I did before, maybe went from here to here, you never know. How would I do that? That's developing proximity. That's listening. That's trying to understand before you assess. Two very separate and important processes of doing good listening. Before I move into assessment, I better make sure I understand not only what the person is saying, but maybe even why they're saying it and what's driving them to have that set of values. I don't think we're very good at this, and I think we have to get better at it. Acts 17 did this. Okay, Paul's already talked about this. Acts 17 did it by saying this: I see you are a very spiritual people. Okay? Whenever I read the beginning of Acts 17, which is Paul speaking to people at Mars Hill, they don't know schmatz about the Bible. In fact, the audience did not know Genesis from, of course, Revelation didn't exist, Genesis from Malachi. They had no idea about the Old Testament. They knew nothing about the faith that Paul ruled his life by. It was a classic pluralistic problem. And so he said, I see all these idols around me. Now, we know what Paul thought about idols. Okay? They made him, to use the German phrase, nicht froh, which means not happy. Okay? He saw all these idols around them, and he opens up by saying, I see that you are a very religious people. And the first time I encountered that passage, I thought to myself, we had music going back to the 60s and 70s and beyond earlier. I thought to myself, Paul, what have you been smoking to open up that way? But what he's trying to do is to connect with people and say, you know what? Let's engage in a spiritual conversation, because spiritual conversations are conversations that are among the most important conversations you could possibly have. And then he interacted with them about, on the one hand, what they were doing and where they were coming from, and he starts here. He starts in, now I'm going to speak theologically for a second, he starts in Genesis 1. We're all made by a Creator God, and we're accountable to that Creator God, whether we recognize it or not. And he's off and running. Because if there is no God, and I said this earlier today, I'll repeat it now, if there is no God, then the only choice we have is to form our own identities. And that's often what's going on in the world. But if there is a God, he is worth knowing. And he is worth contemplating. And he is worth understanding. So, pluralism, let me define pluralism. I have 3 minutes to go and I'm finally getting to definition. Pluralism are the variety of ways people seek meaning. And if they do not believe that they are made in God's image, then the only alternative is to construct an identity. I think that's a very understandable move if you don't believe God exists. And so I want to interact with someone who sees the world that way. That's kind of basic. But we also need to figure out how we're going to live together. The other reality of pluralism is that my neighbors are far more diverse now than they were when I grew up, and we've got to figure out how we can be neighbors to one another and function alongside one another better than we do, which brings us to the Great Commandment. Now, this one I hope you don't lose sleep over. The Great Commandment is great because it's great. It's at the top of the list. Love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, which is a little bit of a problem if you don't think God exists. Okay? And love your neighbors, yourself. And if you study the Bible, you will see that those two loves are actually designed to be connected. It is because I love God and I understand how he made us to be in the image of God that makes every person sacred and that demands, I use that word, demands we love our neighbor. And I could show you passage after passage in the Bible in which there's a discussion about how we relate to God, and the immediate understanding is that means that impacts how I'm relating to someone around me. In fact, the prophets live off of that message. So, what I've said is the gospel is rooted in Genesis 1, and Jesus is seeking to restore what we have lost, so we can be who we were originally designed to be by God. That is the message of the Christian church to the world. You can make sense out of your life and who you are because of the way God made us and because of the act of restoration and grace and kindness and forgiveness that God has stepped in to try and fix through grace and forgiveness and reconciliation and all these kinds of wonderful concepts to make the world a better place. And the only problem is that sometimes we, even in the church, have messed up that story. So we have to make our case in our pluralistic culture for what we believe and why. The church is here for a reason, and the church is intentionally not a part of the world because it's an invitation into a different kind of world. A different kind of world that God has created and that is God-centered, which I think when I look at the world, I'm not sure how God-centered the world is. The world is not the church, and the church exists to serve and nurture believers and hopefully to serve the world by inviting people to a different way of doing things and thinking about them. When the church acts like the world, it makes the church into another special interest group. And there are plenty of those to choose from, and we lose our uniqueness. So we are called to serve people, to be who we're called to be, and let the difference draw who it will to the love, nurture, beauty, goodness, kindness, grace, and responsibility that we all have before the living God.